Okay, let's start with an idea that's, well, it's a little uncomfortable, but it's absolutely fascinating. Think about that feeling of certainty. You know the one, that rock-solid, gut-level conviction that you are 100% right. We all tend to think of it as a good thing, right? A sign of intelligence, maybe, or strength? But what if I told you that feeling has almost nothing to do with being right? What if it's not a measure of truth at all, but just a biological function? A clever, and sometimes pretty dangerous, shortcut your brain takes just to save a little bit of energy. That's what we're going to get into today. We're going to dismantle this idea that feeling certain actually means you're correct.
Just let that sink in for a second. We spend so much of our time and energy trying to spot liars, people who are trying to mislead us on purpose. But this quote suggests the real danger, the far greater risk, comes from someone who is completely sincere, unshakable in their belief, and totally wrong. It's the person who has no clue they're wrong because their own brain is giving them a little reward for their belief. And this isn't just about, winning an argument over dinner. This is about huge decisions in boardrooms, in hospitals, in our own lives that could be built on a foundation that's a complete illusion.
And this, right here, is the crucial distinction we have to make. That powerful sensation of knowing, that little voice inside that says, oh yeah, this is the absolute truth, that's not evidence, it's a feeling. It's generated by a biological process in your brain. You can think of it like any other emotional state, like happiness or anger or fear. And just like those emotions, it can be triggered by things that aren't necessarily based in reality. Because, as we're about to find out, your brain isn't really a truth machine. It's a story machine, and it's way more interested in a story that feels right than one that actually is right.
And this brings us to the central metaphor for this whole thing. See, your brain is by far the most energy-hungry organ you have. It's only about 2% of your body weight, but it burns through something like 20% of your calories. Real, deep, analytical thinking is incredibly expensive, metabolically speaking. So to save power, your brain defaults to shortcuts whenever it can. And certainty? Well, that's the feeling of that power-saving mode kicking in. It's your brain basically saying, all right, I've processed enough here, this story works, let's shut down the expensive thinking and move on. So you see, you don't feel certain because you're right, you feel certain because your brain is being efficient. And in our complicated modern world, that ancient drive for efficiency can be a huge problem.
Okay, so let's make this personal. Because this isn't just some abstract neuroscience concept. This is about how your mind is working, right now, every single day. We're going to explore that gap between what you feel like you know and what you actually know. And trust me, that gap is probably a lot wider than you think.
Go on, just try to picture it in your head, right now. Really visualize it. Where exactly does the chain go? How does it connect the pedals to the wheel? What does the main frame actually look like? Most of us would say, yeah, of course I know what a bicycle looks like. It's simple, it's familiar, we've seen thousands of them. But the moment you're forced to actually explain the details, you suddenly realize there are huge gaps in your knowledge. If you struggled with that, you just experienced something called the illusion of explanatory depth. It's that huge space where we mistake familiarity for real understanding. Our brain gives us the feeling of knowledge, but without the actual data to back it up.
So this leads us to this key concept called satisficing. It's kind of a mashup of the words satisfy and suffice. See, your brain is not an objective, truth-seeking computer. It's a survival machine, and survival often depends on being fast and efficient, not perfectly accurate. So when it's faced with a complex problem, it doesn't run all the possible calculations to find the absolute best solution. Nope. Instead, it finds the first answer that seems plausible, one that fits a good enough story, and then it just stops looking. This saves a ton of energy, but it also leaves us feeling super confident about the very first explanation that just happened to make sense to us.
And here's the real kicker. The reason this whole illusion is so powerful is because it feels good. It literally feels good. When your brain cooks up a neat, coherent story that explains everything, a part of your brain's reward center, called the ventral striatum, releases a hit of dopamine. Yeah, that's the same chemical that makes you feel pleasure from food or winning a game. This dopamine hit creates this state of cognitive fluency. Everything feels smooth, easy, and just right. But it's a trick. It's a cognitive optical illusion. You're not being stubborn or arrogant. Your brain is just neurochemically rewarding you for sticking with your story, whether or not it has anything to do with reality.
So how does the brain actually do this? How does it manufacture this feeling of certainty out of thin air? Well, it's not random. It's a predictable, four-step process. It's a biological feedback loop that takes us from a state of uncomfortable confusion to a state of absolute, and often totally false, conviction. Let's break it down.
First, let's meet the main character in this whole drama, the left hemisphere interpreter. Now, this isn't a metaphor. It's a real network in your brain, discovered by neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga.
Its entire job is to look at all the random bits of information coming in and just make up stories to explain what's happening. It connects the dots. It finds patterns. It creates cause and effect. But here's the thing. Its performance is judged on only one metric: coherence, not accuracy. As long as the story hangs together and makes sense, it considers its job done. It is quite literally a storyteller, not a fact-checker.
And this right here maps out that 4-step journey to false certainty. It all starts with step 1, an information gap. You run into something you don't understand, and this creates confusion, which is uncomfortable and burns a lot of energy. Your brain hates it. So, your left hemisphere interpreter leaps into action and instantly spins a story to fill that gap. Then comes step 2, the fluency reward. The moment that story clicks into place, bam, you get that dopamine hit we talked about. It feels good. That feeling of ease and rightness actually causes the part of your brain that acts as an error detector, the anterior cingulate cortex, to go quiet. And that leads to step 3, the evidence filter. Because you've already gotten a reward for this story, your brain now actively looks for evidence that confirms it and just ignores or dismisses anything that contradicts it. It's classic confirmation bias. And all of this leads to the final step, the overconfidence peak. With your brain's error detector switched off and your fear center disengaged, you feel no risk, only certainty. You've become a total believer in a story that was invented just moments ago to save a little bit of brain fuel.
At this point, you might be thinking this whole system sounds like a terrible design, right? A brain that prefers good stories to hard facts, that seems fundamentally flawed. But for most of human history, this wasn't a bug, it was a feature. It was an absolutely critical survival mechanism.
This all comes down to a concept called survival decisiveness. Just imagine for a second you're one of our early human ancestors out on the savannah. You hear rustle in the tall grass. Is it just the wind, or is it a lion? Well, the ancestor who sits down to carefully analyze the probabilities and weigh all the evidence, they get eaten. But the one who becomes 100% certain it's a lion and immediately runs away survives, even if they were wrong 9 times out of 10. In that world, a fast, confident, wrong decision is infinitely better than a slow, perfectly analyzed one that gets you killed. We are literally the descendants of the ones who jump to conclusions.
And this gets to the real reason behind it all. And it's not about psychology, it's about biology and economics. Fast, intuitive, gut-feeling thinking, that's incredibly cheap. It barely burns any glucose. But slow, deliberate, analytical thinking, that's incredibly expensive. It's like running a heavy program on a laptop. It just drains the battery. So your brain, by default, will always try to use the low-cost option. That feeling of certainty, that's the feeling of successfully staying in that low-energy state, and your brain absolutely loves it.
And there's another equally powerful evolutionary reason for all this: social status. In a small tribe, sounding confident makes you seem competent. It signals that you're a leader. People are just naturally drawn to certainty. On the flip side, voicing doubt or admitting you don't know the answer can be seen as a weakness, which could lower your status in the group. And your brain knows this. A part of it called the medial prefrontal cortex, which handles our social thinking, pushes us to project confidence just to gain influence. So your brain is caught in this bind. It would rather you be a respected leader who is sometimes wrong than a forgotten outsider who is always perfectly right. This is what we call evolutionary lag. We're stuck using hardware designed for tribal survival to navigate a world of spreadsheets and global market.
So here's the crucial point. We're stuck with this hardware. We can't just rewire our brains to stop loving certainty. But what we can do is install better software. We can learn to recognize that feeling of certainty not as a finish line, but as a warning sign, a little alarm bell telling us it's time to consciously switch on a few powerful mental tools to override our brain's laziest habit.
Okay, here's the first tool, and it is incredibly effective, both for work and for personal planning. It's called the pre-mortem, and the name tells you exactly what it is. Instead of doing a post-mortem after a project fails to figure out what went wrong, you do it before you even start. It's a really structured way to force your brain out of its comfy little story and make it actively and safely search for all the potential flaws.
The process is actually pretty simple, but it's profound. You get your team together, or you can even just do this by yourself, and you start with this powerful premise. Okay, let's imagine it's a year from now. This plan that we're all so excited about has failed. It's a complete and total disaster. Now, for the next 15 minutes, everybody writes down every single reason they can think of for why it failed. What went wrong? Which of our assumptions were incorrect? What did we miss? This technique is brilliant because it's identity safe. You're not attacking your colleague's idea, you're just explaining a hypothetical failure. It gives everyone permission to find flaws without looking like they're being negative or disloyal, and it completely short-circuits that deep-seated social pressure to be confident all the time.
All right, our next tool is incredibly simple, but has a huge impact on your thinking. It's all about changing one tiny habit in the way you speak, shifting away from absolute statements and towards probabilities. This small change acts like a switch that keeps your brain's error detection systems online when they would much rather just go to sleep.
So instead of saying, "I'm sure this marketing campaign is going to work," you say, "Based on what I know right now, I'm about 60% sure this will work." The moment you assign a number that isn't 100%, something amazing happens inside your brain. That feeling of total certainty shuts down your ACC, the brain's error detector. But saying 60%, that keeps it active. It's still scanning for that other 40%. It keeps you open to new information, and it makes it way easier to update your beliefs when new data comes in. You're no longer defending an absolute position, you're just updating a probability, which feels a lot less threatening to your ego.
And here are 2 final quick exercises to build what you could call your epistemic fitness. Think of it like strength training for your mind. First, practice active disconfirmation. Now, this is like mental weightlifting. It's uncomfortable, but it makes you so much stronger. Intentionally go find an expert or an article you totally disagree with, and just try to find one valid, well-reasoned point they make. The goal isn't to change your mind, it's to force your brain to work against its natural confirmation bias. The second tool is the beginner's frame. Before you make a big decision, just say to yourself, you know what, I'm probably missing at least 50% of the important variables here. That simple act of intellectual humility keeps your mind open and in learning mode, and it stops it from locking into that dopamine high of feeling like you've got it all figured out.
So, after all of this, what's the ultimate takeaway? It's this: that powerful, compelling feeling of certainty is not a signal of truth. It's a signal that your brain has stopped thinking. It's a cognitive resting state. True intelligence isn't about finding the right answers and then defending them to the death. It's about maintaining the curiosity to keep asking better questions, especially in those very moments when you feel the most sure of yourself. The most powerful mind isn't the one that's always right, it's the one that's never finished learning and is always willing to be wrong. Don't trust your certainty, trust your questions.